On October 26, 2022, Elon Musk walked into Twitter's San Francisco headquarters carrying a porcelain sink. He tweeted a video of himself walking through the lobby with it, captioned, "Entering Twitter HQ. Let that sink in." 2 days later, he completed a $44 billion acquisition of one of the most influential platforms in human history, firing the CEO, the CFO, and most of the senior leadership team within hours. Within a week, he had laid off approximately half of Twitter's 7,500 employees. Within a year, the blue bird that had defined the platform for 16 years was gone, replaced by a black X on a white background. Within 18 months, the company Musk had paid $44 billion for was valued by Fidelity, one of its investors, at approximately $19 billion. A loss of over $25 billion in paper value in under 2 years. But Twitter's story didn't begin with Elon Musk. It began almost 2 decades earlier, with a product so simple, so strange, and so poorly understood by its own creators that nobody, including the people who built it, was entirely sure what it was for. This is the full story of Twitter, from its chaotic founding to its $44 billion sale to the world's richest man, and what it tells us about the hardest problem in technology. How do you build a business around something the world can't stop using but won't pay for? Twitter was not designed. It was stumbled into. In 2006, a podcasting startup called Odeo was facing an existential crisis. Apple had just announced that iTunes would include a podcasting platform, directly competing with Odeo's core product before it had gained meaningful traction. To find a new direction, Odeo's leadership organized a series of internal brainstorming sessions. One of those sessions, led by a quiet 29-year-old named Jack Dorsey, produced an idea. A service that let people share short status updates. "What are you doing right now?" with a group of followers. The concept was inspired partly by dispatch services Dorsey had studied as a teenager. The way taxi companies and emergency services used short, real-time messages to coordinate across a network. The first tweet was sent by Dorsey on March 21, 2006. "Just setting up my Tubudu TTR." Twitter, the name came from a dictionary definition, meaning a short burst of inconsequential information. Launched publicly in July 2006 and grew slowly at first. Then, at the South by Southwest conference in March 2007, Twitter's usage tripled over 2 days as thousands of tech enthusiasts discovered it simultaneously. The growth that followed was extraordinary and almost entirely organic. Twitter spent almost nothing on marketing in its early years. People simply told other people about it. But from the very beginning, Twitter had a problem that would follow it for the next 16 years. Nobody inside the company could agree on what Twitter actually was, and therefore, nobody could agree on how to make it a sustainable business. Twitter went public in November 2013 at a valuation of approximately $14 billion. The IPO was considered a success. The stock jumped nearly 73% on its first day of trading. But the celebration obscured a fundamental tension that would define Twitter's entire existence as a public company. The platform was extraordinarily influential and extraordinarily difficult to make money from. Twitter had become, by 2013, the closest thing the internet had to a global public square. Breaking news broke on Twitter first. Political movements organized on Twitter. Cultural conversations happened on Twitter in real time, in a way that no other platform could replicate. But unlike Facebook, Twitter's feed was public by default, which meant the detailed personal data that made Facebook's advertising extraordinarily precise was largely unavailable to Twitter's ad targeting systems. And unlike Google, Twitter's users weren't expressing explicit intent, searching for something they wanted to buy. They were sharing thoughts, following conversations, and consuming content in a way that was much harder to connect directly to purchasing decisions. The result was a platform that brands wanted to be on because the cultural conversations happened there. but that consistently underdelivered on the measurable ROI that digital advertising buyers demanded. Twitter's revenue grew steadily through the mid-2010s. Its profits did not. The company lost money in most of the years between its IPO and its acquisition. Meanwhile, user growth, the metric Wall Street watched most closely, began plateauing in ways that suggested Twitter's addressable audience was fundamentally smaller than Facebook's or Instagram's. Twitter was not a bad product. It was for a specific type of highly engaged user: journalists, politicians, academics, celebrities, and people who cared intensely about public discourse. An irreplaceable one, but irreplaceable for a niche. However influential that niche was, is a difficult foundation for a $40 billion public company. Elon Musk began publicly engaging with Twitter in early 2022. First, as a user complaining about the platform's content moderation policies, then as an investor acquiring a 9.2% stake in April 2022. He was briefly offered a seat on Twitter's board, which would have limited his ownership stake, before declining and instead making an unsolicited offer to acquire the entire company for $54.20 per share, valuing it at approximately $44 billion. Twitter's board initially resisted. Then, after a period of legal conflict during which Musk attempted to exit the deal, citing concerns about the number of bot accounts on the platform, he ultimately completed the acquisition in October 2022, under court pressure to honor the original agreement. The price he paid, $54.20 per share, was significantly above where Twitter's stock had been trading before his involvement, and above what most analysts believed the company was worth as a standalone business. What followed was one of the most publicly documented and debated corporate transformations in recent memory. Musk moved immediately and aggressively. Mass layoffs reduced the workforce from approximately 7,500 to under 2,000 within months. Offices were closed. Free meals, which had been a standard Silicon Valley perk, were eliminated overnight. The content moderation team was dramatically reduced, a decision that led to a significant increase in hate speech and misinformation on the platform, according to multiple independent researchers, and triggered an advertiser exodus that severely damaged Twitter's already fragile revenue model. Major brands including Apple, Disney, IBM, and hundreds of others paused or reduced their Twitter advertising spending. By some estimates, Twitter's advertising revenue fell by over 50% in the year following the acquisition. Musk introduced Twitter Blue, a paid verification subscription, attempting to replace advertising revenue with direct user payments. Uptake was significant, but not sufficient to offset the advertiser losses. In July 2023, the Bluebird logo was replaced with X, part of Musk's stated ambition to transform Twitter into an everything app modeled loosely on WeChat in China that would eventually encompass payments, commerce, and other services beyond social media. The rebranding was almost universally criticized by branding experts, by longtime users, and by advertisers as destroying one of the most recognized brand identities in technology for a vision that remained largely theoretical. Twitter's story raises a question that the technology industry has never fully answered. What is a platform worth if it is culturally indispensable but financially fragile? For 16 years, Twitter occupied a unique position in the media landscape. No other platform concentrated the people who shape public opinion: journalists, politicians, executives, celebrities, academics, in quite the same way. When something happened in the world, Twitter was where the people who mattered most went to respond. That influence was real. Its translation into sustainable revenue was not. The fundamental problem Twitter never solved was that its most valuable users, the highly engaged, highly influential people who made the platform culturally significant, were also the users least susceptible to the kind of algorithmically targeted advertising that drives revenue on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. Musk's acquisition didn't create that problem, but paying $44 billion for a company with that problem, significantly above market value, financed substantially with debt that required hundreds of millions in annual interest payments made it dramatically harder to solve. The everything app vision Musk articulated for X may ultimately prove prescient. WeChat's model, a single app that handles messaging, payments, commerce, and services, has proven extraordinarily successful in China. Whether it can be replicated in Western markets, on a platform whose brand identity has been fundamentally altered and whose advertiser relationships have been severely damaged, is a question that remains genuinely open. What is not open is the immediate financial reality. Musk paid more than the business was worth, under conditions that made turning it around exceptionally difficult, in a compressed time frame that left little room for the kind of patient, long-term investment that platform transformations typically require. Twitter, or X, still exists. It still has hundreds of millions of users. The conversations that happen there still shape news cycles, political discourse, and cultural moments in ways no other platform has fully replicated. Whether it survives as an independent entity, is eventually sold, or evolves into something genuinely new under Musk's ownership, is a story that hasn't finished being written. What is already clear is that the $44 billion acquisition represents one of the most expensive and most public lessons in recent business history about the gap between cultural value and financial value, and how difficult it is to bridge that gap once it has widened for over a decade. If you want to understand the decisions behind the world's biggest corporate rises, falls, and transformations, subscribe. There's a new one every week. And if today's story made you think about the future of social media and public discourse, I've linked a book in the description. Character Limit by Kate Conger and Ryan Mack. It's the most detailed account of how the Twitter acquisition happened and what followed. Link is below.